Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the Preacher's Husband. Today, we're talking about Numbers chapter 21 and 22. And we start right off with the Canaanite king getting defeated. Now, the Canaanite king of Arad, who lived in the Negev area. Now, he fought against Israel and he captured some of the prisoners, took some of them prisoner, and then Israel made a vow to the Lord. They basically said, hey, let us go and attack this guy and we'll take all his cities and destroy them for you. And the Lord listened to him and said, okay, go do it. So Israel completely destroyed them and their cities, so they named the place Hormah. And then they set out from Mount Hor by way of the Red Sea, and the people became impatient again, as if they hadn't learned before. The people spoke against God. Now, this is the seventh time that the people have spoken against God and Moses. Their words were that same monotonous complaining about food and water. Wah, wah, wah. As if God hadn't provided each and every time they complained. So guess what happens? The Lord sends poisonous snakes and they bite them. They bite the complainers and they die. And the people started begging Moses, please intercede for us, intercede for us. And he does, and of course Moses interceded for the people. Now here is verse 7. It says to me, the people then came to Moses and said, we have sinned by speaking against the Lord and against you. Intercede with the Lord so that he will take the snakes away from us. And Moses interceded for the people. Now I think of that, I just picture Moses as kind of this governor figure or a presidential figure of the entire people. And if I relate that to our current situation here in the United States, he would be basically like the president, right? So people are going to the president saying, please pray to God for us. Well, could that happen in the United States with separation of church and state? Sure it could, because we don't really have separation of church and state. In fact, the United States of America, every one of their sessions of Congress and the Senate actually start with a prayer every single time. On May the 1st in 1789, here I am on my history kick again, but bear with me, the United States Congress elected the Reverend William Lynn, a Dutch Reformed minister from New York City, to be the first chaplain of the U.S. House of Representatives, appropriating $500 from the federal treasury to pay his salary. During the period when Congress first met in the new capital of Washington, D.C., the House and Senate chaplains regularly led Christian services every Sunday in the House chamber. In 1860, Rabbi Morris Jacob Raphael was the first Jewish clergyman invited to open a House session with prayer. Both the House and the Senate have continued to regularly open every single session with prayer. Now, that does not go without challenge, and that has been challenged. And I looked up and I tried to find a recent challenge to that, and I did find one. It was actually in April the 19th of 2019 when the Supreme Court, no, it wasn't the Supreme Court, it was an appellate court, basically said that we're going to uphold this. It says, we shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, which basically means the United States could not declare a state religion. Praying was not against the law. It's still not against the law. In fact, it's encouraged in our laws. But an atheist basically sued the United States, saying that this is not fair because they denied an atheist the right to come and do a secular prayer. Well, why would the United States do that? Well, because there were regulations and there were rules as to saying a prayer. And those rules there were three of them. Number one, they must be sponsored by a House member. Okay, there was a House member that sponsored this person. Number two, they must be ordained. Well, if atheism is the unbelief in religion, you can't be ordained an atheist minister, can you? And I guess they have actually recently developed a church that's the Church of Atheism or whatever. And they do ordain, I guess you would call him a minister of some sort. But the third one is this. Instead of addressing house members. They're not allowed to address house members in their prayer. They're only allowed to address a higher power. So he was turned down because the atheists don't believe in a higher power, do they? So he lost. That's April in 2019. That was just last year when that happened. So it's still being upheld in the courts today. Now, let's move on into the Bible. After this, we've got the journey around Moab. And in verse 14, it says, "Therefore it is stated in the book of the Lord's wars." Being that history buff that I am, I'm like, okay, I've got to figure out what is this book of the Lord's wars and what was in it. Well, unfortunately, I was unable to find it because it does not exist. The book of the Lord's wars was apparently an early source of Israelite documentation of God's victories on behalf of his people. This source is otherwise unknown in the Old Testament, and it has been lost to time. I tried Google searches and I tried other searches, and I could not find any evidence that it exists anymore. I didn't even find anybody claiming that they have found it anywhere. There's not even any fake claims on it out there. So there are books about it though. Then we get to the Amorite Kings being defeated. Now the Amorite Kings being defeated, this was a very similar scenario that we had in Edom with the Edomites. Basically, Israel goes in and sends a messenger and says, "Hey, let us pass through your land. We're not going to tear nothing up. Just let us pass through. We'll just go through peacefully." Instead, King Sihon of the Amorites, he gathered his whole army and went out to confront Israel in the wilderness. And he fought against Israel. He just said, "No, I'm gonna kill these dudes." But Israel struck him with the sword and took possession of his land from the Arnon to the Jabbok. Israel took all the cities and lived in all of these Amorite cities. And then later on, they turned and went up the road to Bashan. The king of Og of Bashan came out against them with his whole army as well. But the Israelites struck him down as well, and they took possession of his land too. Then we get to chapter 22, which is the story of Balak trying to hire Balaam. Now, Balak is called Moab's king, meaning that he was the head of an emerging tribe or a confederation of the like, similar groups such as the Edomites and the Ammonites. Now, the Midianites that are involved in this, they originated in North Arabia and southern Transjordan area, and according to Genesis chapter 25 verses 1 through 6, they were actually descendants of Abraham as well and his concubine Keturah. The Midianite elders, they joined Balak's emissaries in enlisting the services of Balaam to curse Israel. Now in this chapter, Balaam himself, he was from Mesopotamia. Basically, they go to Balaam, and he is this guy that's supposed to be able to talk to God. And anyone that he blesses is blessed by God. Anybody he curses is cursed by God. Because clearly, he has had an encounter with God himself at some point. So verse 12, it says, "Then God said to Balaam, you are not to go with them." Because they wanted Balaam to come with them and curse the Israelites so that they could defeat the Israelites. And God's like, "Nope, you're not going to go with them. You're not to curse these people. They're blessed." So he tells them, "No, I'm not going to go with you guys." Word gets back to Balak, and he sends some higher up officials that are higher in rank, says, "You're going to convince him one way or another. It's going to happen." So he tells them the same thing. "Stay overnight here. Let me talk to God about this. I'll tell you what he says in the morning." So he does. He talks to God. And God basically said, "Since these men have come to summon you, get up and go with them. But you must only do what I tell you." Then there's this tussle between Balaam and a donkey and an angel that he encounters along the way that's trying to reiterate God's words. Only do what God tells you to do. Only say what God tells you to say. That's it. And this is where we leave off. Now tomorrow we're going to do 23, 24, and 25 in Numbers, and we're going to get through the story of Balaam, the oracles, and Israel's worship of Baal. It's going to get interesting tomorrow. It's going to get into some deep stuff. So, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Bible in 1 Year with the Preacher's Husband. Tune in tomorrow for another episode. If you have liked this, hit the like button, subscribe button, and of course click the little jingle bell, and so you can get notified the next time I upload a video. And of course, put something in the comments if I skipped over something or if there's something you want to talk a little more in depth about. Hope to see you tomorrow.